everybody, to another episode of Unplugged Church Edition. Listen, this is the season of the woman, and we got some special guests in the house today. This is Evangelist Freddie Jones, and I have my favorite co-host here with me,
Elder Stacy Whitehead.
and we are here to celebrate you and you. Listen, I know you're wondering, why do you have this man sitting here when we're talking about season of the woman, and we want to make sure that we have a special guest because this man is going to bring some truth, okay? Y'all seen him before. You've been here before. He's not a stranger. This is Pastor Marvin McKenstry Jr., all the way from Baltimore. Let him know who you are. Represent. Introduce yourself, Pastor.
Pastor Marvin McKenstry Jr., the pastor of Victory House Worship Center, and just someone that loves God and loves these two ladies. I took that drive to come up and hang out with my sisters.
Yes. Thank you so much. I know
No problem.
he's a busy man. He's a pastor, a dad, granddad. I mean, he does it all. But we definitely appreciate your time because that is definitely sacred, right? So we would like to continue this talk. We're talking about season of the woman, and we want to hear somebody who doesn't mind telling the truth, telling it like it is, keeping it 100 with this man who's going to be able to share the impact that women have had in his life. Because women, we know we make a difference. And sometimes we're in a world, we're in a career, we're in a path where you feel like I'm being overlooked, I'm not listening, nobody's listening, and we don't want to be considered that aggressive woman. However, you do make a difference. So, Pastor McKenstry, you have recently, you have a lot of stuff you can say about women. So let's start from young. Let's take it back because I know he got some stuff to say. So tell us about your childhood.
So when I consider women, of course, I think about my mom, who, as early as me being 10 months old, was separated from my abusive father, and who really stepped up and became everything from the breadwinner.
Yes.
To the person that was our sole support in the family. And although I was blessed to have my grandfather in my life, so I don't tell people I didn't have a man in my life, my dad wasn't there due to his addiction and his personal issues. But my mom and my grandmother were my go-to team. My grandmother is the person that made sure that the foundation was set so that I would be Pastor Marvin one day, because I have a very unconventional path that got me to this place. It's not one where I was a second, third generation preacher, pastor,
Right.
none of that. My grandmother made sure those seeds were sown so that when I got older, went to prison, and got in all kinds of trouble when I came home. And she even ministered to me while I was there, sending me handwritten prayers, letters, just things that remind me of who I am. And when I came home, it was her that took me back to church and began the path to what you see now. But I even think about the school system that I was in. I remember having one man principal, and just about every teacher that I had was a black woman. And how the nurturing aspect of who they were as people infiltrated that environment where I was that trouble kid. I was that kid that, for whatever reason, for a multiplicity of reasons, was not the easiest to get along. I was ashamed of being a smart kid. And I wanted to be with the rough crowd and all of that. And there were times when I could have been thrown out of school.
Right.
But because of some nurturing black woman who was either a teacher or administrator, they always saw something in me that I didn't even know to recognize or to realize. Even in the earliest aspects of my career, one of the first, the way that I broke into the human services field, which I am recognized in Baltimore, in the region as one of the leading people in my field around workforce development. It was a woman named Brenda Sierra, who saw my potential when I didn't even have a high school diploma. After coming home from prison, going into their program seeking help, called me and said, "Hey, I got a job for you. If you'll trust me, I'll teach you everything you need to know." And here, 25 years later, I sit at the highest levels of my career field. So women have always been my champion. They've always been that person who would courageously step in and see to it that opportunity was presented to me, and I definitely can't leave out my forerunner, who was a person that pastored the church for 23 years before I became the pastor. And when she got a hold of me, I was a wreck.
Wow.
And the one good thing, well, not the only good thing, but one of the greatest things is she loved me. She loved me enough to hold me accountable. I ain't talking about that yes person love that loves you and no, she loved me enough to hold me accountable.
Boy, you ain't
Didn't
right.
didn't care about my multiple gifts and talents.
Right.
She cared more about my soul.
That's so good.
And was willing to chop away at the tree until she could get down to the roots and see to it that I begin a journey to become all that God has for me to be. So women have always been those people that have stepped in and stepped up. And I do want to say this because, I have children that have different mothers. And even in the spaces where my folly created children that weren't in the space of relationships, I thank God for the women that raised my children in my absence
so good.
in the household. Was a single parent for the majority of my children. I raised them in my house. But even in that co-parenting space, I was blessed and have been blessed with some phenomenal women who didn't allow what was the failing of our own relationship to be a cause for our children to not have healthy parents. And fatherhood has been amazing to me, and I'm excited because God has blessed me now with the woman who I believe I'm gonna move forward through life with.
Amen. All right. You hear that, ladies. He's taken. Okay.
He's off the
it.
market.
Listen, I know he was here
on the
before.
market the last time, but he's off now, ladies. Sorry.
Oh, but that's good.
That's
good.
That is good. That's wonderful. But I like the way you said that, women laid the foundation, because we had another male guest, and we wanted to hear a male's perspective of, women that have impacted, influenced, and inspired you to be the person that you are, the man that you are. And we wanted you to talk about some of those women as well as yourself. And now you're soon to be fiance, I should say, your soon to be wife, I should say, even how she has, how you have gotten from there last year being single to here, because you talked about, what type of woman it would take to be, your wife and come alongside you. So we want you to, delve into
To
that
me,
as well.
women are the most courageous people in the urban black community in America. While men have gone off to war at certain phases of being a black community in the United States of America, women have stayed home and held down our households. When we got to a place that we were going to march for freedom during the days of Jim Crow and we shall overcome, women walked beside the men and made that happen. When we entered into the war on drugs in the 80s, and those same black men that went away to war came back with addictions, and the addiction or the crime that came along with that lifestyle caused mass incarceration, women raised the children.
Yes.
I think it's somewhat understated just how being black in urban America, auntie and mommy and all of those, like I come from a group of young black men who we all shared our mothers. 25, 26 years ago now, when my mother was called home, I watched God's promise of being a mother to the motherless manifested through the women that were in my life. You know what I mean? People who would step in and step up. And when I talk about my mother specifically, I'm clear that my intellect, the way that I articulate and all those things comes from my dad. My mom was a really simple woman, but in that simplicity, she had a grind in her that was just unyielding. My mother had a heart attack on her job and transitioned. I remember my mother being such a hard worker that one time, and we were kids, we thought it was funny, but it wasn't funny. When I think back on it now, my mother worked from 6 a.m. to 2:30, and it was around Christmas time. And 6 a.m. in the morning and 6 a.m. in the evening, 6 p.m. looks exactly alike during that time of year. My mom had gotten off around 2:30. She woke up and it was after 6 o'clock, but it was 6 p.m. She was frantic, thinking that she had missed the alarm and was going to be late for work. And I have a different level of appreciation when I tell that story now, because I was not the child that knew we was poor.
Right.
We lived in, listen, I come from low income Baltimore. I lived in the projects.
Right.
The real, not the poor neighborhood, the housing project, elevators that
Housing.
smelled like urine, you know, high rise buildings that wasn't nothing spectacular. And I just think about how her goal in life was to not allow us to know that we were poor, to not be defeated by my father's addiction and the things that caused us to, because my parents were married till the day my mother passed away. They never divorced. But when she left, she was not going to be crippled in her ability to be a good mother and to provide for us because my dad was not there, because he was in addiction, because he was in and out of prison. Because that's the kind of thing that I think goes so overlooked
Right.
when we really consider who the black woman is to black people. And then again, to go back to my grandmother, who just transitioned in April of this year. I had the pleasure of taking her into my home the last 3 years of her life after my grandfather transitioned, and really going from hanging out with her to caring for her every need as sickness came in and began to transition her to be with the Lord. And when I look back over my life and I really think about who my grandmother is, because I don't do the was thing. My ancestors are with me. I'm Christian and African. I don't throw away our spiritualism because, you know, some white man said do it this way. But when I think about who my grandmother is, her legacy, her influence in my life, like Paul talked about Timothy's mother and his grandmother, being such a great influence and preparing him before he ever got to the mentor that was Timothy. They laid the foundation, and that's really who I am as a worker, as a hard worker, as a parent, and all. It's my mother. Who I am as a man of God, and who I am as a man about community, and that's my grandmother. And again, it's not to vilify men, because I understand that this stage of my life, that everything from the abuser that he became to the absent father was driven by my daddy's addiction. My daddy is saved now. He's in church with me every Sunday. He loves the Lord, and he loves supporting his son because God is a healer. But in that space where he was distant and where he was absent, it was those women that made sure that this black man always had a chance and opportunity, even in the face of my own stupidity. You know,
They
so
never stopped loving you.
they never stopped loving, never stopped believing in me. I mean, and it was some times. I remember the very last time that I got convicted and had to actually go to prison. I was about 23 years old. And I remember looking over my shoulder, and I remember seeing my mother and my grandmother and my grandfather, because the three of them were in the courtroom. And when I looked over my shoulder and I saw them, it was like, man, why are you here? Because the first time I was ever convicted as a crime as an adult, I was only 15. And I went to jail for 5 years.
They charged you as an adult.
They charged me as an adult. I went to jail for 5 years. My family believed in me, stood by me. I came out. I came out by way of a program that said if I was willing to go in the military, they would give me a second chance. Went in the military, made them ultimately proud, came back home, started selling dope, and went back to prison. And I remember looking over my shoulder at those three people who believed in me enough for me to rebound. And then here I am falling off and putting them through that again. You know, and it broke something in me between, you know, looking at my mother and my grandmother and realizing that this time I'm a father. I have some real life responsibilities that I shouldn't be in this situation again. You know, I prayed to God. It was like, God, if you give me a second chance this time, I'm going to change it all. And guess where I lived when I came home from prison, while I was trying to find a job and trying to do those things? I lived right in my grandmother's house. When I finally got a job after losing my mom, and I became a single father because I got custody of my children. Where did my children go while I went to work? To my grandmother's house. I never had a child of mine in a daycare center. It's that village concept that really had its foundation in those two amazing and phenomenal women that I cannot pay homage to enough. And probably my care for my grandmother became a public thing around maybe the last 6 or 7 years. But she still lived on her own with my grandfather. And when he passes, when she came into my house, and there are people all the time who say, you know, what a great job I did with her, man, I was paying a bill that I really she couldn't live long enough for me to pay all of that bill,
Right,
because the truth is, I would have never had the space and time to become successful in my
Yeah.
career, to grow, or any of that if I didn't have the security and stability that they provided me.
Absolutely.
And the fact that I was a single father raising my children alone. And even with that, my aunt, who was my mother's only sister, who lives with me now, and I care for her. My children with school, I never had to take a day off to go to the school. I would go to the school for planned assemblies and things like that where I could maneuver my schedule to be off appropriately.
Right.
But in the spaces where there was something sudden or something like that, my aunt went and volunteered at the school that my children were at so that there would be a presence
Right.
in the school, and literally became another surrogate mother to my children.
That's
The
beautiful.
black woman is so underrated. And again, even thinking about teachers, we had a teacher in the school. I went to Lexington Terrace Elementary School. That's where you went when you lived in
Yes.
Lexington Terrace Projects, LT,
That's the real
right?
That's the real
That's the
hood.
real hood, right? We had a teacher there named Miss Harris. And I remember one day, Miss Harris was known for having that trust of the parents and that foundational love from her students, that she could treat you like she was auntie.
Yes.
And I remember one
Those
day,
make the best
I
teachers.
called myself bucking on Miss Harris.
Oh,
Miss
she
Harris
killed you.
threw me up against that wall
That's
and let
right,
me
Miss
know
Harris.
I'm
That's
a
right.
woman, but you still a fifth grade little boy.
Boy.
Right? And when I called myself telling my mother and Miss Harris ganged up on me because, again, these were people that were trusted in the community.
Right.
Trusted in the community to really have, because they knew they wasn't going to hurt you, they was going to love you.
That's right.
And you needed that kind of tough
did.
love. And when I think about now, some of the things I see as a father who has had children in Baltimore public schools and how parents are towards teachers in response to their children acting a fool.
Right.
I can't believe it. Like my mother, I was going to get a couple of beatings.
Wow.
I
was
grew
gonna
up
get
in
that
school
one
like
at school.
that. Well, I went to private school where they spanked you. And I told my mother, I was like, you don't have to spank me because my teacher already said. And she said, what? She didn't know this.
Right.
But they definitely took a ruler
Oh,
and
yeah.
tapped them hands or legs,
Miss
but
Lee in my school. You
it's
have it.
abuse. Don't do it though.
Yeah, so it was about those trusted figures and even being known so much for what they call, I hate this word, activism. I don't hate the word so much as who
How
it
they use it and
represents.
stuff.
Right. But I'm a part of a huge men's movement. They actually having a community event today, but I told them I had to be here.
Sorry, guys.
We put 1,000 men in the Martin Luther King parade a couple of years ago. 300 men walking into communities trying to help. And the truth is, when we walk through, you see the black woman and she steps up and she's crying. She's crying because she has prayed for, dreamed of, and held the community down while men were trying to get past all of our differences and all of that sort of thing to get in place to be able to have a positive impact. So, Michael Eric Dyson wrote a book called Why I Love Black Women. And it literally chronicles, and this, because I don't want to take credit to say that I just thought of and chose to do this work. No, that book helped me really connect the dots on what black womanhood has meant in the life of this black man. Yeah.
It makes a difference. You told a story as well when you were in church, and everyone knows your gift. Marvin can preach, he can teach, sing, play, all kinds of instruments, everything. Gifted, just gifted, right? That's why he probably did so much, because you just didn't know what to do with it all.
Do it all that.
But you were there, and Bishop Saunders
Oh man.
just spoke a word that and I appreciate seasoned women. Another guest talked about Mother Neal, who just, where are these women that have the time and the heart to definitely encourage and treat these people like, boy, you're my son too. So get over here
Right.
and eat this chicken after I lay you out, you know. But share about Bishop Saunders. What did she
So
do?
we had our and I wear this proudly. My spiritual mom was the first pastor Bishop Saunders ever laid hands on, affirmed, and took under her wing, and I'm the very last that she ever did that for. But we were in church and we had convocation every year in November, first week of November. And this particular day, while she was preaching, something broke in my spirit. And one of the things that while I'm sitting here so proudly articulating how great black women are, I was an abuser of black women. Not physically, I've never put my hands on a woman, but emotionally, manipulative, sexually, I was not in a space where the value that I articulate now
Right.
for the black woman was in my regular practice.
Right.
Now that's a whole nother story of how we got there. But with Bishop Sanders, one day something just broke in me. And I went to the altar right in the middle of her preaching, and it was almost as though she could absorb what my pain point was. And she came down, abandoned the message, she put her hand on me. And Bishop had this thing literally where it was almost as though when she did that, there would be a transfer where she literally could unlock and enter into that space in you to really understand. And she put her hand on my head, and because God knows I would chase anybody, any man that looked like he would be a mentor. And I got let down so many times, either because somebody died or because there really wasn't an interest in mentoring me. I've even been in spaces where there have been men that my gifts either made them jealous or intimidated them.
Right, right.
And here I am, I'm here, I'm available, I want to be mentored and dropped. And Bishop laid a hand on me and she said, all the men in here
Right.
ought to be ashamed of themselves because you have young men like this and he's so gifted, you so either impressed or intimidated by his gifts that you won't come and affirm
Right.
him. And until the men raise up and affirm him, he's going to continue to try to justify his manhood with his sex life.
Right.
And it really broke, and even understanding where that was and what that meant emotionally, a lot of my physical relationships,
Yes.
if I was somewhere and the world made me feel inadequate, nothing made me feel better than being on top of a woman.
Right.
It made me feel strong. It
Like a
made me
man,
feel
right.
like a man. And that, you know, no matter what area I would go into, and feel that in that, and it helped me because first of all, it was in love. I did not feel embarrassed.
Right.
I did not feel called out. That was a move of God. And she had this saying. She said, you'll only be as sick as your secrets. And that day, my secret was out.
I know
It was
that's
no
right.
longer a secret. People could pray for me.
Freedom.
I had a sense of freedom. And in that free place,
Jesus.
I could literally do the necessary work to change that dynamic in my life. And that was something that was really, really, really needed.
Right.
You
And
know
it
what I
took a
mean?
woman to do
Oh my,
that.
it did,
My
because
God.
there were times when I went to men and you could literally see where I'm saying, bro, I'm broken,
help.
I'm not right, I'm not
Jesus.
doing right.
Crying out.
And you'll see in their eyes where they get to the point that they trying to live vicariously through what I'm saying.
Jesus.
You feel what I'm saying?
Jesus.
You know what I mean? They wish it was
And they
them.
probably didn't know how
right.
to even deal
Oh man.
with that. You know, because there are broken men out here.
Yeah.
But they're
Right.
so guarded, they don't have that freedom. You know, that's a good topic. We're going to have to come back to that one
Because
day.
sometimes you can be looking for healing, but we can't receive healing from a broken person.
Well, healing requires intimacy, and men struggle with intimacy. When you look at
'Cause
Jesus,
they don't.
and the story of the woman at the well, he had a must needs go through Samaria, meaning that was her day. She was gonna get free that day. Whatever her plight was, and I know they didn't try to make her a harlot. They made a loose woman because she had. That is not the essence of that story.
Right.
First of all, when you read that story, you got to understand that John is telling the story, and when you read John, you read it through a lens of love because that's how he views salvation. So Jesus loved her enough to break off from his crew. Y'all forgive my hood vernacular. This is how the word sounds to me. God had to break up. Jesus broke off from his crew
Right.
to go specifically to the well at that time to meet this woman who
I had to
had
go.
been. And we tell the story she had 5 husbands
Right.
and the one she was shacking up with. No.
Right.
Tell the story this way. There were 5 men that she trusted in the institution of marriage. Even after the first 4, she still trusted a 5th one, and they were devout men who couldn't keep her.
My God, Jesus.
They
Tell it
couldn't
that
keep
way
her.
now.
So she finds herself in bed with a man who don't even think enough of her to go get the water.
My Lord. Jesus.
I'm talking manhood here. You won't even get up and go get the water for me, but I'm supposed to have some respect for men. The thing that made their dialogue, the dialogue between her and Jesus, go back and forth so much is because Jesus showed up looking like her problem. He was a man.
Right.
In the form of a man, and her issues
Because
were
she
with
wanted to know
men.
what he was going to draw water with, like you
Yeah,
hear.
she made it political. Y'all say this and we say that. She made it religious. She made it traditional. She did all of that, and Jesus standing there unbothered like sis,
That's
right?
what I'm-
But the woman with the issue of blood, they need to call her the woman with the medical condition. The woman that had the real issues was that woman that had those issues with men, so much so when her deliverance showed up in the form of a man, she couldn't recognize the deliverance because it looked like her issue, right? What Jesus needed to do was crack through all of that
Yes.
because it really required
Yes.
intimacy.
Yes.
And when he got to the point that he broke through, she made a profound statement. She said, "Come and meet a man that told me everything about me." Guess what she said right in that moment? The 6 men that she was with before never took time to get to know her.
Right.
They married her, one laid up with her, but they never took. She was ecstatic,
that's
not
so
about
passionate.
healing, not about deliverance, not about being free, but there was a man that actually took time to get past all of the stuff I threw at him to get to know me. Intimacy. Healing requires intimacy. And until men can be vulnerable in safe spaces so that that intimacy that we need in that moment, I could be vulnerable. Bishop brought me to a place of vulnerability. When you in there and people become aware that you have these struggles and tell you stuff like you got a lust demon,
Right.
you're making me feel worse about myself.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They didn't know that the whole my introduction to human sexuality was by molestation from a woman who was supposed to care for me. I got introduced to human sexuality at 11 years old by a woman who was 30-something years old who was a babysitter and was supposed. And this is
Did
literally
you even
how
know
I got
you were
here.
getting molested at that time, or
I
you just
thought I
thought
was
you
the
were doing the
man.
man, right?
Right. Not
I
realizing.
thought I was. I didn't know nothing was wrong until
the
it all
root of
came
it.
out. And when it all came out, I was in a generation and age we didn't get no therapy. I didn't. I therapy for the next few years led me to having 6 children by 6 different women.
Right.
Because my therapy was still trying to seek out like a crackhead, trying to find that
You was
first feeling.
introduced to something and so early. And
Inappropriate. The other introduction I had was finding my grandfather porn collection. No rites of passage, no healthy
Right.
passage from
Discussion,
childhood into
yeah,
adulthood,
yes.
introduction to sit down, and then get in the church and the church tell me I got a demon. So if that's what you're going to do, I'm going to stay quiet. I ain't going to really seek healing.
right. Especially
You telling
not
me I'm possessed.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That day, that woman of God laid hands on me, and she made it okay to that I had a need,
Right.
and she brought me into a space of intimacy where God could come in, and He could do what only He could do. We were just talking about it. People not coming to see Marvin. They not here. They are here. We need people need to get to Jesus.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Right,
Listen,
right.
Marvin, this is getting
This
so
is
good,
good.
honey.
This is good.
Listen, we got to do this. So we're going to end right here because I don't want to go past, but we want to have a part 2, if that's all right with you, because we want to dive more into the healing part, right? And how have women? Because you're dating now, you're off the market now, so somewhere along this journey, you definitely have started that healing process. So listen, guys. Tune in. Don't forget to like, follow, and share on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify. You want to definitely follow this. Also, if you want to email, unplugforme@gmail.com. Love you, Sugar Plums. Tune in. Part 2's coming back.
Thank you for viewing and listening to Unplugged Church Edition. Remember to subscribe to both Spotify and YouTube. Don't forget, like, follow, and share on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you again for listening to Unplugged Church Edition as we continue to have soulful conversations.